Friday started for me about 2 o'clock in the morning. 2 o'clock that morning, I went to the Emergency Operations Center just to check in on our folks and make sure we had a 24-hour staff there. We'd stood up the EOC the day before. So, I went through and just checked on our folks there, made sure everybody had what they needed.
So Friday, I just remember driving into work early that morning about 5:30. It was already very busy. It had been busy the night before. Crews had been out working all night. The EOC had been busy all night, fielding phone calls. The 911 center was busy. And just driving into work at 5 o'clock that morning, hearing the trees fall, watching trees fall, recognizing that this Helene had finally gotten here.
So I arrived at the Emergency Operations Center, or the EOC, around 5 o'clock on Friday morning, really because I knew the television cycles would start around then with the live news. And I was live just on an interview with every single television station in the area. And then later I was on with both local radio stations. And then later I was on with iHeart stations out of Asheville, just updating them on what was going on.
I was actually working in the EOC the night the storm started. It was supposed to start, I think, around 2:30 a.m. and we were sitting in the EOC all quiet, nothing going on, and then nothing. 2:30 come, 3 o'clock come, nothing much. But about 4:30, we started getting a dispatch for a couple of trees down, power line down, tree down here, and then it pretty much exploded.
And then as the storm got here, I don't even know the time frame, 5:30, 6 o'clock. One call would show up for a power line down, a tree down, and another, and then just bam, it hit us. We saw just resources absolutely overloaded, just call after call after call.
We had over 1,000 active 911 calls on the screen at one time. Our 911 telecommunicators, they were struggling. They were struggling not only with the volume, but with the gravity of the situation, because they're used to being that first contact, that point of help, that piece of the system that gets these people that are going through the worst day of their life. They're the ones that are used to initiating that system that brings them relief, right? And they realized that there was no relief, there was no help. These people were calling in and they were facing tragedy, and there was literally no help available, no help to reach them.
I'm Shanna Dotson. I am a dispatcher at the Sheriff's Office in the 911 Center, and I'm the supervisor on Baker Squad. We had no idea what was going on outside at all, because we don't have windows. Where we actually sit, there are no windows that face outside. And so, we were getting all these calls, and, it was just weird because we had no idea what was happening, because we couldn't see, what was happening. And, some of the calls that we got, people telling us that their house is floating away. It was hard to wrap my head around that literally happening to somebody.
My name's Emily Simpson. I'm a dispatcher for Henderson County Sheriff's Office, and I was in the call center on Friday morning, working off a shift from Thursday night when the storm hit. Almost just kind of like almost like an out-of-body experience, knowing that we're in it, but not really having any idea how to handle any of it. When it first started and we were starting to get a lot of calls and a lot of pending calls, I was actually working fire and EMS radio and just trying to get the calls out as quickly as possible, dispatching them. And then when it got to be too many pending calls on the board to even know what to do with, it was a weird place to be, because normally we're the ones sending help to people, and we were in a position where, one, we didn't know if we sent them or told them where to go, they would be able to get there, or just having too many calls on the board to dispatch out. And so it was like our hands were tied, being able to do what we normally do and what we're good at.
There was one point in the EOC that You know, we were just writing calls down on a piece of paper, on Post-it notes, because they were going out so quickly. Our telecommunicators did a phenomenal job of dispatching the calls as quickly as they could, but at one time there was over 1,000 911 calls active in the system Friday.
I stayed here. I have a bedroom that I can stay here. And then I woke at 4:40 with the alarms going off because there were so many calls with flooding and things like that. So I immediately woke up and started working at 5 o'clock. And then that day was just a barrage of contacts and things going on and rescues.
We got woke up around 5 o'clock in the morning saying, hey, we're starting to get some calls. We looked at CAD. There was probably 70 or 80 calls, and it was almost like a Rolodex, just, you know, as fast as it could, it was just going up.
My partner had come in to work early, but she had chosen to work an extra shift the night before, so she had been out in it before me. And she looked at me and said, it's dangerous out there. I mean, so dangerous, I don't think we should be running calls.
And I never will forget at one point hearing Chief Robert Griffin from Edenville Fire and Rescue making a call on the radio that the conditions had gotten so unsafe that it was even challenging to respond to calls, and they were going to have to pause responding to certain areas because trees were falling so rapidly. Firefighters were getting trapped and not able to get out to respond to other calls, and they couldn't risk losing somebody that in turn could help somebody else.
It was horrible to not be able to respond, especially because, you know, we're sitting here itching to do something. You know, we're in a profession that helps, and we're in a profession that goes no matter where you are in the county, what time of day it is. You know, that's something that we pride ourselves on, whether you're, you know, out in the woods and we've got to hike into you, or if you're in town or at a local retirement community, we're going to get to you and we're going to take care of you. And so for that to very quickly be turned around to where we could not get to people, and we had to make the decisions to turn around, were very difficult. They weren't not fun decisions to make.
During that time, we were attempting to reach callers that had called 911 for medical complaints and otherwise, and calling them back on any phones we could find that had service, either our personal phones or truck phones, all of that. So we were making contact with these patients and attempting to give them advice on how to manage these conditions at home. And that helped a little bit to feel like we were still helping our community. It was tough. It was tough to not be able to help. We're used to.
Henderson County has never suspended operations, and we suspended operations just due to the safety concern for our staff. We had a third of our fleet cut off, and we were trying to send people from town out, and they would get about a quarter of a mile and it was flooded. You know, where Moe's Barbecue is in the park, it was flooded down the street towards Mountain Home. Trees were down all over the road, power lines were down on the road. We couldn't get anywhere. So I say that, you know, a third of the fleet was stuck, but actually nobody could really move more than a quarter of a mile without encountering a tree. So we had to suspend operations, and you know, the most difficult part, it's not only for me, but for dispatch. I'm sure it was difficult for dispatch to have people calling 911 saying, I need help, and them saying, we can't come right now. You know, we're gonna come to you as soon as we can, but we can't get to you.
And then when the winds did subside to where it was safe to respond again, you know, firefighters were faced with largely every road in the county being closed with trees down. So it became a process of it's sometimes hours to get to folks in need. And that's where friends and neighbors really stepped in and helped out in Henderson County.
It is very much controlled chaos. It's like they say, a duck. A duck is very calm on the surface, but underneath is paddling like crazy. And that's really how I felt inside. It's knowing that there's so much that needs to get done, the finite resources available at the time, because it impacted not just Henderson County, but most of Western and some of it Central North Carolina. I mean, it was getting the resources in when we could. It took We pre-planned, got some stuff in before the storm, but once that ran out, we were on our own there for a little while. And really, the culture of preparedness, both individually as a responder, knowing that we're leaving our families at home, making sure they're prepared so we can do what we can. And then it impacting the way it did, it was now we got to go find our other resources, our other responders, our other employees that aren't checking in. Now it's not just the general public, but now we're having to rescue ourselves and getting our people into a place to where they can come in and help others.
Then we lost all communications within the county. Once we lost those, then you're sitting there with so many calls on the board, no telephone, hardwire, cell phone. We were able finally to get our systems at the sheriff's office up and running with our Starlink, which was good. That meant we could call outside of the area. We couldn't call within the area, within Henderson County, because nobody else had phone service, right? So that coordination to start working with our backup counties across the state to get them to pick up our 911 calls that were going unanswered.
So in Henderson County, we were fortunate that our emergency responder radio system stayed up throughout the entire storm, so we were able to communicate with our emergency responders. But one of the things that we really hadn't thought through at the time is when all the infrastructure collapses, when largely the entire power grid goes down, when the fiber network that feeds all the cell towers goes down, the cell towers stop working. And at a time when most folks don't have a home phone anymore, and if they did, the lines were probably tore up. We're really in a position where it's a struggle to just communicate with the public.
Once the storm really got going, I gotta be honest, it's a blur. I don't remember everything that happened. I just remembered so much information was coming in, and we were just trying to get out as much information as we could. And there for a while, we were okay. We were lucky at the EOC, we never really lost power, and we never really lost the internet, so we could get information out.
We went during that period of time from a 2020 disaster to a 1990 disaster. Shortly after that, as the communications towers lost, those that did exist ran out of fuel. We went from a 1990s disaster to an 1890s disaster. There was a period of time there we were running the county with pencil and paper.
We had town criers. Every day we printed posters and flyers that got distributed to all the corners of the county, and they got shared at fire stations. They got left at churches, so hopefully if somebody wasn't receiving communications through the radio, that word of mouth would prevail and folks could know where they could go to get some essential services, some food, some water, where shelters were available, and kind of a snapshot of what's going on in the rest of the county, because as the community became isolated, the folks in Green River didn't know what was happening in Girton. The folks in Etowah didn't recognize what was happening in Deep Gap. So sharing that information became critical, and we heavily relied on our nonprofit partners to get that information out to what pieces of the community they could connect with.
You know, one way I always describe the storm to people when I talk about Henderson County is areas that never flooded, areas that sometimes flood a little, they flooded a lot, and areas that typically flood a lot, they were devastated. And we saw that devastation down in the Hickory Nut Gorge area in the Bat Cave and Girton communities.
Friday morning we got up and we started making our plan for the day. Our plan was to evacuate people to the Bat Cave Baptist Church. And in order to even get down there, we had to cut a path down Highway 74 only to get to the 74 and 64 bridge, and the bridge was gone on both ends.
Well, the whole point of us going down there during a hurricane is because they can get cut off. Highway 64 can be cut off, 64, 74 into Chimney Rock could be cut off, number 9, and then 74 into Asheville through Girton is usually pretty pretty safe bet. We started walking, so we had stood and watched number 9 cave in and buildings go in, and we wouldn't even really get on the 74 bridge until the water subsided, because I mean, I think all of us knew it was going to flip over or something, with water going over the top of it and buildings going under it. But it held miraculously. So I think we started walking that way and cutting. And when we got to the 64 bridge and saw that 40-foot gap between the bridge, what was left of the bridge and land, and then of course you could see that Chimney Rock was devastated, or our portion of Lake Lure Highway there. And then we started working back. So we did all that, and then we started working back towards Girton, and didn't make it very far before the road was gone there too. So.
And as we were continuing to approach residences and try to clear the residences on the side of the river was continuing to rise pretty rapidly. At one point we were probably waist deep in water on the highway, and we noticed that the water was flowing away from the river, which didn't make sense. We looked down and we noticed a large gaping hole with water vortexing into it, equivalent to like a toilet bowl, flushing with you standing in the bowl. And we realized that a storm grate had blown out and water was being sucked into that, being pulled under a culvert under the road. And so we had to rapidly extricate ourselves from that water feature. We would have gotten sucked into that pipe.
As I'm looking around thinking that, a tree's gonna fall, I feel my feet quiver. And so I turned to Tyler and I said, "Tyler, get across the bridge." I said, "That's not trees falling, that's the asphalt cracking."
It was pretty unreal for us looking across the river and watching whole residences get ripped off the side of the mountain, go in, and as soon as they went into the water, just get demolished within a matter of seconds to minutes and come up in just chunks. And so at that point, we had to make the decision. I talked to Toby and Dan, and we just said nobody goes in the water, because at that point we were watching pieces of I-beams, 300-pound propane tanks were coming down and running into the side of the fire department, off-gassing propane. We were watching pretty significant amounts of deadly debris being deposited in the river. And at that point there wasn't thunder and lightning, but it sounded like nonstop thunder because there were boulders the size of an SUV rolling together under the surface of the water, going down the rocky rod. And so the river was no longer water, it was a meat grinder. And so we made the decision, the difficult decision, that we were not going to put a boat in the water. We were not going to put personnel in the water, because that would have been a death sentence. And at some point you have to make the decision that we have to remain alive to be able to help people. And so it was very difficult to watch across this expanse of water and watch houses being ripped off into the river and not being able to do the thing we trained to do, which is go and help people.
It was just devastating to look down through Chimney Rock and see how much wider the river was. I mean, it's literally 4 times wider than the channel was before. And all that, there were houses that were very damaged that were still standing that have since fallen in. But just as far as you could see, just destruction.
But during the storm, it was very much transitioned from rescue to get people to a safe place and shelter and don't die. And it's very rare in a rescue situation where we are truly in a life over limb, survive as a primary objective, so that we would be alive after the storm passed to be able to help people.
The whole Batcave experience for me was, I have been on 18 hurricane deployments. I have never seen such violence, such destruction as we had that day. Most of the hurricanes we go to, waters, yeah, it floods and it ruins a lot of things, but it's passive. This was funneled and extremely forceful. And so to me, it left a lasting impression on what water can actually do.
I'm Joe Russell. I'm a supervisor at Henderson County EMS. I live in the Big Hunter community. we were really trapped. The bridge was gone. We had landslides up in Deep Gap. There's a big valley up there where all that water pooled together, and it devastated the confluences of the river up there. And then it got together and came down through here. I mean, if just standing here, I could hold my thumb up and blot out the Big Hungry River. But the night of the storm, it was above that bridge up, and it even took the guardrails out on that side of the road. So the amount of water that was coming down through here was just, it's unimaginable unless you can see it, because you don't have to see it. If you're down here, you can feel it. It's just like a train.
This time we learned that catastrophic is when it comes to the mountains. It's landslides, it's debris flows, it's bridges out, and the county can turn into islands, basically.
You know, I can't say enough about the tremendous work that the team here at the EOC and all of our first responders on the front lines did during the storm. Folks went days without sleep, unsure of what was happening at their homes, because, you know, they lost contact with their loved ones as well. And folks didn't have an opportunity to go check on their family members. They were just praying that everything was safe. But everyone did a phenomenal job of coming together. We're very blessed in our community to have tremendous partners. Our community has made strong investments in public safety, in our dispatchers and our law enforcement officers, our firefighters, our EMS workers, our rescue squad workers, and our emergency management and fire marshal staff. That paid off here. It paid off in the city of Hendersonville, and everywhere in Henderson County, that everyone just came together, worked tirelessly for days before more help was able to get here from outside the area. You have to remember, you know, in the mountains, we rely on our friends and neighbors to help each other a lot. And in a situation like this, we can't help each other. We're busy taking care of ourselves. So it took, in our case, it took days to get additional resources from out of state, because all the in-state resources we had used before the storm. So it took, our first relief team that came for the EOC was from Alabama. And then we had a team from Alaska. You know, so it took everybody coming together to make things as successful as they were. There's certainly lessons learned, things we can do better next time, but we're very blessed to live in a tremendous community where folks really go above and beyond to take care of their friends and families and neighbors.